that simple. Yeah, I can't argue with that. You must be right.
All right, Scott, ready?
Things are all not working very hard. Right? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Church.
All ready? Okay. So I'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody, to the select board meeting. It's nice to have some people here. Our first item of business, as usual, are the minutes. We have the minutes of December 6th, 2022. Is there a motion?
Move we accept them subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Page 2. And page 3. Hearing no corrections that were to be made, all those in favor of approving the minutes of December 6, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next is public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to make any public comment? And anyone on Zoom who wishes to make any public comment?
No one on Zoom, Terry.
All right. So we'll go directly to our first really item of business, and that's a resolution thanking Fire Lieutenant Sean Soper for his service. And we have the following resolution to adopt tonight. Whereas Sean Soper became a career member of the Williston Fire Department on August 28th, 2006, and served in the rank of lieutenant following promotion on February 24th, 2014. And whereas on November 16th, 2022, Lieutenant Soper retired from the department, having served the community of Williston for over 16 years. And whereas Lieutenant Soper throughout his career exemplified the mission of Williston Fire to provide fire and EMS services and care to the community. And whereas the dedication of Lieutenant Soper to serve the community in all hours of the day and night by answering the call for duty and service cannot be understated. And whereas Lieutenant Soper served as mentor to his fellow members of the department, sharing his experience, insight, and wisdom. Now therefore be it resolved, the Williston Selectboard hereby thanks Lieutenant Sean Soper for his over 16 years of dedicated service to the community and the people of Williston as a member of the fire department, and wish him the very best in his retirement. So is there a motion?
I'll move to adopt the resolution thanking retired Fire Lieutenant Sean Soper for his service to the community.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So congratulations to Lieutenant Soper on your retirement. We will have a signed document for you that Eric will have framed and will be presented to you at a later date. So on behalf of the Select Board, we really appreciate all of your efforts, all your work over the 16 years in serving the community. And anyone wishes to make any statements, Chief, make any statements tonight?
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. I know that if you understand the lieutenant, he's not one for fanfare, and that's been his MO since I've known him. I know he's more uncomfortable sitting here than he is sitting in the right front seat of a fire engine going to a call, which says something about his character, right? A very humble person. But since my tenure here and before that, Sean's just the person you can go to. Here's my problem, can you fix it? Sean knew who to get things done with, knew how to get them done. He had the contacts in whatever Rolodex you had, or whatever, or if you just lived here, whatever. But Sean really was a person that knew how the station needed to be maintained, and he took a lot of personal pride in that, even to the point where I would come in and I'd find Sean doing the small tasks, right? I had to remind him, that he has firefighters that work under him, it's okay to ask them to do that. But he wasn't the type of person that would sit back and ask them to do something that he could do himself. And that legacy will last forever. And so, just, it's my sincere thanks. I send my sincere thanks. I hope you have a safe, healthy retirement. I know that you still have the fire within you. So wherever that takes you, right, in your future, let that guide you. And if I may, Mr. Chair, just as a personal note, we issued some recognition to our staff last night with a locker tag. If you know the station, you come in and we had some paper handwritten. Some were as fancy as having marker on them and not in pen. Some appear to be drawn by maybe some children. But I felt it only appropriate that even though the lieutenant was moving on, that we at least issue him this quick token. We'll have more formal recognition in the future, but on behalf of our, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
And it's only fitting that his shift is here and serving tonight, so. Thank you very much.
Anyone else from the fire department wishes to make any comments tonight? All shy, okay. Well, again, thank you, Lieutenant, for all of your service, and we really appreciate you being here tonight, too. as
Thank
well.
you.
So, thank you.
It's truly been a pleasure working with the town rules.
Good, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So, we'll start the rest of the business now, and the next thing on the agenda is talking about the vacant select board seat, and Eric has given us some information, and perhaps you'd tell us a little bit about that, and then we can have a discussion.
Yep, as Terry mentioned, there's a vacant seat on the board following a recent resignation for a remaining duration of a 3-year term that expires in March of 2024. Article 14, Section J of the town charter states, a vacancy on the select board shall be filled by a majority vote of the remaining board, said appointment to run until the next annual town meeting at which an election shall be warned to fill the unexpired term. Staff seeking direction from the board whether it would wish to consider interviewing and appointing a member of the public to fill the vacant seat until town meeting day 2023, or operating as a 4-member board until town meeting when a question can be placed on the ballot to elect to the select board a new member for the remainder of the unexpired term until March of 2024.
Good, thank you. So as you may remember, the last time we made an appointment was when Joy Limoges resigned about 2 weeks before the town meeting. So we really didn't have an opportunity to appoint anyone at that point. And since an election couldn't be held because it was so close to town meeting, we did make an appointment, and we appointed Greta to that after I think we had 11 candidates at that time, and narrowed the field down to 5, and then had interviews. So I put together sort of a timeline if we were to try to appoint someone for the vacant seat. So if we were to start advertising, let's say on the 27th of December, and have the people who are interested put their applications in by, say, January 9th, I think it's about 2 weeks time for them to do that. If we were able to then start interviewing either on the 17th or the 24th, or maybe both, depending on the number of people who applied, there's a possibility we could appoint somebody on the 17th or the 24th, but that is only 5 or 6 weeks before town meeting. And we would essentially be at the very tail end of the budget discussions, and with the election coming up, with the resignation occurring now, there will be an election if people are interested in putting their petitions in. There will be an election on the 7th of March. So it doesn't make any sense to me at this point to consider appointing anyone at this point. Other thoughts?
I agree. I think that, signatures will be due for a petition late January.
30th, yep.
So the turnaround time doesn't really, to me, make sense to appoint somebody at this point.
I agree.
I concur. I don't see the benefits.
I don't think we need a motion to this. I think we just say we intend not to, but by consensus, we are planning on not filling it and letting the citizens of Williston have their vote to fill the position through the election process.
Yep.
Okay, then we'll move on to the recreation space lease agreement, and Eric, you're gonna lead off on that?
Yep. The board might recall at its November 15th meeting, it passed a motion authorizing me as town manager to sign an intent to lease agreement for building space located at 94 Harvest Lane for recreation department use. This lease agreement was then prepared by the property owner and reviewed by our town attorney. This lease has been distributed to the select board to review with some edits suggested by the town attorney. They're also being circulated back to the landlord for consideration. As we look at this, the select board does have the option to enter an executive session at some point this evening to discuss the terms of the agreement with staff if it should so choose. Also suggested you could authorize the town manager to enter into the lease agreement when deemed satisfactory by the town attorney following further discussion with the landlord, which I've included with your agenda. Looking for feedback from the board on what direction you'd like to take at this point.
Any comments or questions regarding the proposed agreement?
Has the agreement gone back to the landlord with the attorney's edits and?
Yeah, I've sent it back to them the end of last week. They were reviewing it, so I'm waiting to hear back from them if they have any, want to discuss any of those edits further. And I could confer with the town attorney if they don't want to accept all the edits to find something he finds acceptable and in the town's best interest if that were the case.
And the basic tenets of the agreement haven't changed. Most of this is just relatively minor tweaks to the agreement. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, just getting our additional legal review just to make sure our interests are supported here. But nothing that struck us in going through it as major holdups I would anticipate, but just some things that would make the terms of the lease we feel a little more advantageous for the town at this point.
Okay.
If there's no further questions, there is a motion suggested.
I moved up, oh,
Nope.
it's
Hey.
rare, please.
That's what his voice sounds like.
I didn't know you knew how to say the word move.
I'll move to authorize the town manager to enter into a lease agreement with Allen Brook Development for space at 94 Harvest Lane for the Recreation Department's use upon recommendation by the town attorney.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
No, thank you.
Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did I hear four? Any opposed? We have four, so we have done that. We'll move on then to the park donation, gifting, and naming policy and facility use policy. Eric, you'll start off, and Todd Goodwin is here to talk about it as well.
Yep. A couple policy documents for the board to look at this evening with our Recreation and Parks Department. You might recall, maybe it was back in September. I remember the first time this came before you, looking at the gifting and donation policy, and I know they've worked on looking at some naming components of that as well. We also have in your packet looking at facility use policy. And with the addition of the indoor space, there's been some language added there, and it also has some financial components. And looking at the history here, I don't believe the select board has reviewed the facility use policy in the past. I thought it'd be appropriate for the board to look at it at this juncture, and looking for direction from the board if feel this is a document the select board should be approving with at this juncture and anything in the future, or if it's something more administrative. But I didn't have clear direction from history on this. Recreation Parks Committee's reviewed it in the past, and given that it's new offering for an indoor space. I thought it'd be appropriate for the board to take a look at it this evening and provide staff with direction how you want to proceed with this policy document moving forward. So I won't take everything from Todd this evening. There's no initial questions. I'll ask Todd to walk through what him and the Recreation Parks Committee have been working on here.
So Todd, anything that you would like to add to it before we go to questions?
No. I'll take your questions and we'll go from there. See where it leads.
So first of all, let's do the parks donation and naming policy since we've seen that before. Any questions or comments regarding that particular part of it?
And I'll just say that we've always had park donations, and this is just putting something formally to that. So if somebody wanted to do a memorial bench, we had the price of the bench and they got the memorial and we checked it all out. It's all in here now, and on the 4th page is a request form so we can actually have something in writing and file it away and keep it. So we're making this more of a something tangible to have rather than just us in the department doing it. And then the naming policy piece came up with the hopes that building out Allenbrook, we would have people wanting to say, hey, I'd love to build a pavilion for you in such person's name. And we just needed a way to vent that out and figure it out and make sure it was appropriate and stuff. But if somebody wants to build an amenity in a park, that's a great thing. We're not costing the taxpayers money. So this was that policy, just to formalize that and make it something tangible.
Good, thank you. Other questions, comments?
And Eric made this a town policy rather than a department policy. So felt it's something that could be used, for the town.
So Todd, my question is going to center around when somebody is making a donation for something in a park. First of all, and I'm sorry, I haven't read this I'm not as prepared tonight as I should be, so I'm going to apologize for that. Is there criteria for what types of park amenities or improvements they can make donations regarding? And I'm thinking back to, it probably was before your time, there was somebody who wanted to donate a scoreboard. Seems innocuous enough, but it actually raised some questions because of the sponsor and what the sponsor, whatever the right word is, product was, what it was, the sponsor did. And so I'm just wondering if this addresses those type issues.
Yeah, so in here on page 3, there's some general criteria. Donations must be compatible, I'm just paraphrasing, in areas not covered by the master plan. So like if we have plans for something in a park, a scoreboard is not a plan, so that could do that. Age and anticipated maintenance requirements, and then there's specific criteria of memorial plaques, cash donations, structures, site furnishing, plants or trees, and artwork. So it kind of spells that out, and everything gives us a right to say yes or no to things. And one other piece in here, it says that the person has to come to us, first of all, with their idea, and then if we say, hey, that's a great idea, then we're giving them this form, and then this form spells everything out and it makes that hard, tangible item that we have, and we can build off from there. So we do have, yes, if it's not appropriate, I think we have some things in here too that, they can't support tobacco or marijuana or those types of things as well.
Okay.
So
if there were a donation that, let's say, meets the criterion here, but for some reason that you weren't able to anticipate, raises controversy, within the town, let's say, how would you deal with that?
since it's a town policy,
Okay.
I would.
He deals with it.
I would think that we're bringing this to the select board, so
Okay.
I would bring it to the Recreation and Parks Committee, first of all, get their feelings, advice, and then, I'd probably be sitting here again and, explaining, the reasons why and why not for us and that kind of thing, and making, I don't know how you would deal with it, but as a select board, saying yes or no to,
Right.
the advice of the Recreation and Parks Committee, my advice, and then yours ultimately.
Okay.
And again, since this is a town policy, that reaches up to this level.
Okay. All right, good, thank you.
Any other questions regarding this particular part of it? We'll talk about the facilities use policy then. This is the first time we've seen this, I believe. And are there any questions or comments regarding this?
So this was fields and facility use policy, and it was very different than what you're seeing here in the past. And what it was we're reserving, renting out field space, and so put together a policy and had all the rules and everything else. With the rental facility as a possibility, wanted to change this to facility use policy and fee schedule, so we could add that piece in here. So it became more of a general of all facilities that Williston Recreation and Parks oversees, and would be overseeing to develop this policy. So it's more in general, and then rules for the fields are on the permit application and will also be on the permit, and rules for the rental facility would be in those places as well. And then we have a special events permit, which are events, I shouldn't say special events, other than athletics that happen in parks, that we manage compared to special events that are happening within the town, and that has its own set of rules. So this was written and reviewed by, again, myself, Eric, and Aaron, assistant to town manager, and what we've come up with for facility use in the department.
So questions, comments?
I should mention the ROC is the Recreation Opportunities for the Community. That's the acronym for the facility we're looking to lease on Harvest Lane. Good work by the department coming up with that.
Yeah.
So you're gonna take a program at The Rock.
It's got a nice ring to it.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. The only question is, again, not as prepared as I wish I was, but the use of the word permit, or that's what you obtain, should I read anything into that? It's more like a lease agreement. You're leasing this for...
We're permitting them to use a facility for a given day and time, and there's a fee attached to that. That's what we're meaning by permit. So it's a permit of use.
Okay.
And that's spelled out on the permit, and they're asking for that on the permit application.
Yep. And it was more from I was thinking more from the standpoint of, I think of certain things that the town permits, and they're kind of different than what this permit is about.
Right.
But a permit is a totally appropriate mechanism to use for, okay, then I'm good.
The only question I had is that I noticed the facility use fee schedule on, I'm not sure what page it is, the fourth?
The fourth page?
Yeah, has courts and tennis, pickleball, volleyball, but it doesn't name basketball courts, which, at Rosignol.
Okay. Yep.
Also noticed that courts are cheaper to rent than fields.
They
Assume
are.
that's because the fields are so big.
You don't have to mow a court, you don't have to line a court, you don't have to fertilize a court, so pretty much we put up the nets on the courts. And that's,
Pure
we put 'em
profit
up,
for the town.
we put them up in the beginning of the season, we take them down at the end of the season, and that's pretty much the extent of the court maintenance. So that's why they do cost more. And you notice that the baseball, softball field is less than the multi-purpose field, and that's because we don't line the infield, that's the batter's box and the lines to first and third. If we line those, where we're set up and manpower that we have, it would be hours before it would be used, so it would get ruined. So it's easier for the teams to line those fields just before their games. And that is built into the time, but they're not charged for that time. So
It all sounds good.
Are there costs, like commensurate with other towns' fees and?
I do, before we set these, I do look at what is out there. Sometimes I'll send out an email just asking in general what everybody is charging and stuff like that. And we're still, you may find another place that's $30, but they don't line the fields, where we're $30 and line the field. So I would say we're still pretty much the cheapest around.
So
I don't like to say
should we
that.
be charging more?
I don't like to say that too loud, because I don't want everybody to come here.
Right.
But the other thing that we did too was on this fee schedule, now that you're focused on it, there used to be 2 fees, a resident and a non-resident, and we went to just 1 fee because teams are coming with residents and non-residents on a team that's playing. So rather than, and a resident fee was, say under the soccer fields, $25, and a non-resident was $35. So we took the middle of the road and increased our fees this year by $5 on all those. And you can see we've added the meeting space, the Rock, which is the rental, and we did a little bit more with events and other amenities, which we didn't charge for before, like electricity and stuff like that.
Other questions, comments?
Hopefully quick, 2 questions. I'm noticing under fees, a difference in the per person for nonprofit versus for-profit. And it's a significant difference. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, nonprofits, they're trying to make money for themselves. So you take the American Cancer Association, if they wanted to run. We're trying to recoup some of that back without taking all of their money, which they're raising for a good cause. Sometimes I'll say to them, name us as a sponsor, and we're not charging anything. If it's a for-profit, they're doing a run and they're making money for a profit organization, I don't feel too bad about saying you can add that to $5 to your registration fee that you're paying to us, type of thing. So it's looking at the organizations or the businesses that are being profit or non-profit and their reason for that.
Okay. And then the last question was under vendors, food, drink, product, et cetera. Would a vendor be able to, would there be an event where they may want to serve or have alcohol, is that allowed?
I don't think that's allowed in our parks.
Yeah, I don't believe in our, we've allowed it at Catamount under special event permits. Anything that have to do with serving alcohol would be a catering permit that the select board would see.
So that would be above and beyond what would be required by this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
This is vendors, like we do food trucks for the 4th of July. This is allowing that. If baseball organization during the hit-a-thon wanted to bring in some vendors, we're just looking to protect ourselves and know what they're doing.
Right.
So I'm not that they're going to, but if they were all of a sudden offering alcohol, we go put the brakes on. We don't allow that, or you got to go through this process to make that allowable. I don't foresee any recreation program offering alcohol in its parks type of thing. It's not.
Then there's this thing called cyclocross. That's where they seem to encourage it.
Any other questions, comments? If not, thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing all this back.
They're in favor of the policy.
Oh, it's the SD Ireland, the cement truck with the lights.
What's that?
There's a parade of trucks with Christmas lights going by.
Oh, wait, I think it's the military convoy, actually. Yeah.
So are the lights on purpose or?
Yeah,
normal
they're
lights?
decorate, they
Okay.
decorate the trucks. Yeah.
What-
forgot that
Terry,
was happening.
on the last policy there, is that something the board would like to approve whenever there's changes to it, including the fee schedule, or?
On the park donation policy? Or
The facility use policy.
Facilities.
In terms of like fee changes and things, are you
Yeah,
thinking?
is that something the board would like to see annually, or have staff set that administratively?
Yes.
I mean, it feels it's more like a committee staff to me, but
Unless we get complaints about it from, I would presume that the committee can do it.
Okay,
Agreed. Yeah.
perfect, thank you.
Moving on to motor vehicle and traffic ordinance amendments, and Eric, you're gonna talk about that?
Yep. Sorry, just misplaced my notes on that one. So this was before the board back in October, first reading of proposed amendments to the town's motor vehicle and traffic ordinance. And at that meeting, the board had a few questions. First had consensus to proceed with the ordinance amendment process, and then had a few questions for staff to follow up on. So we worked on that. I put a memo together for the board and also included the redlined ordinance as it stands with these changes. The biggest lift on this was the appendices, to bring those up to date, that Aaron in my office took the lead on that, and that was certainly a heavy lift here. But Terry, if you want, I can kind of walk through the memo for the board here.
Yeah, please.
So the first piece was Article 5, subsection D. The board inquired whether sentence I'll read should be stricken or remain in the ordinance, and it said, "No vehicle will be driven at speeds that a reasonable person will believe to be too fast for existing road conditions." Per the board's direction, I consulted with the town attorney on this phrasing. I shared with you via email the town attorney's opinion on that section of the ordinance, and the town attorneys recommended that remain in the ordinance as written.
If I remember correctly, it's in state statute in some way, that
Yes.
term. Okay.
That's that one. Then Article 9, subsection C, there's inquiry about including Class 4 roads in the sections for the list of prohibitions for through truck traffic. I looked at our Class 4 roads listing with Public Works Director Bruce Hoare. The town has a small number of Class 4 road sections. Most of these are either unpassable or don't connect anywhere. We don't anticipate an issue with a truck becoming stuck on a Class 4 road section, given the nature and locations of these limited road segments. Staff's suggestion is to not amend the ordinance any further at this point. And then the board's direction at the last meeting was keeping in Article 10, Section 10.02, the phrase "at owner's expense in the event of a snowstorm or in the event of past violations." Just memo reflects that was the board's discussion that evening. And then Article 11, Section 11.02, this included the towing and storage fees. The ordinance authorized setting these fees, and after further discussion, staff suggesting that instead of putting these in the ordinance, amending your annual fee schedule to set these fees. That could be part of the June revisions every year, setting the fee schedule for the fiscal year, provides you more flexibility to change them outside of warning a ordinance amendment process. I know there's a couple questions about how the proposed fees are set, and actually I have that in the next part of the agenda, if you want to keep it separate from the ordinance. But, those were the main points for discussion from the board on the 18th. Should the board want to proceed, you could consider a motion to warn a public hearing, or if you have additional thoughts for changes, staff can do some additional work and bring those back to you at another meeting.
Questions, comments regarding the
No?
memo and the
It
ordinance?
appears our comments, concerns were adequately addressed, in my opinion.
So there is a motion suggested to call a public hearing on this.
Move to warn a public hearing on proposed amendments to the town's motor vehicle and traffic ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, moving right along to user fees and charges schedule amendment. You have a handout on this as well, Eric?
Yep, so as I mentioned, if the board would like to pull this separate from the ordinance and amend your fee schedule, the suggestion from staff is establishing an FY23 towing fee of $125 per tow, a storage fee of $35 per day, beginning on the day of the tow. These fees were assembled after consulting rates in the area by staff. The storage fee for towed vehicles generally begins the day of the tow, but it can be dependent on the company. And charging these fees are a means for the town to recoup its cost should a vehicle need to be towed if there's a violation of the ordinance.
Questions regarding the proposal?
The only comment I have is that could become expensive very quickly.
Yes.
So don't do it, I guess.
To date, we've had challenges with violations of the ordinance, but not having a fee set for towing a vehicle. So this will give the police department some more ability to do that, to rectify those situations.
So there is a motion suggested for this one as well.
Move to amend the fiscal year 2023 user fee and charges schedule to include a fee for vehicle towing and storage per the town's motor vehicle and traffic ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We're moving on then to the Public Works Facility solar panel purchase option. And Eric, you can lead off with the discussion. We have Melinda here, and I think Jeff forwarded as well. So why don't you both come up to the table?
Yep, I'll do a brief introduction and turn it over to Melinda and Jeff here. So the town, you may remember back when the town built the Public Works facility that we have solar generation on the roof. Back in 2016, when the town entered into the agreement, there was a purchase option after 7 years. So 2023 will be the 7th year coming up. So the purchase option is for a fixed price for $125,000. That option kicks in October of next year, and I think we need to give notice by June of coming up if the town wants to exercise that option. We've had some conversation with the town attorney. We have about $132,000 in unspent bond proceeds from when the Public Works facility was built. Those are proceeds that we need to spend. If the board wanted to move forward with exercising this option and purchasing the solar panels, those unspent bond proceeds could be the source of funding to make that purchase. And consulting with the town attorney, it's most likely to do that. You would need to warn a question for town meeting coming up in March. You'd have to make that decision by the end of January, hence starting conversations with the board this evening. We do need to just confirm, based on the scope of work in the original bond documents, and have the town attorney review that, but I'm anticipating right now that would likely be something that need to be placed on the warning, and should the board, after its initial discussion, want staff to further pursue that and looking at this option in more depth, I'll have an answer definitively for you early in January. So I tasked Melinda, our Energy and Community Development Planner, with looking at this with Jeff Forward, a consultant based out of Richmond who's helped the town look at these in the past, including this array and the trackers behind Town Hall. They've done some great analysis looking at this, and they'll walk that through the board, kind of what the numbers look like and some things for the board to think about when it comes down to risk here. The Energy Committee's looked at this with Melinda. The Energy Committee is recommending the exercising the option and moving forward with the purchase. But I think I'll turn it over to Melinda and Jeff to walk through this for the board, and certainly have a lot of pieces to it. So.
Sure. Jeff, I'm going to let you provide a summary of your analysis, and then I can provide a summary of the Energy Committee's recommendation.
Okay.
So, hello again. I was here back in 2016 when you originally were considering this project, and I think again in 2018 when you were evaluating whether to buy the solar field out back here. Who I am is I'm an energy consultant. I live in Richmond. I'm on the Williston Selectboard now, so I understand where you're at. The town asked me to evaluate, crunch some numbers essentially of what the comparison would be purchasing the array essentially now, or in year 15, or just leaving it where it is right now, right now you get 10% of the benefit of the value of the production off the solar array on the building. So in order to do that analysis, I had to come up with some assumptions. And I welcome questions about them. I'll try to walk through them a little bit. The first assumption that we looked at was operation and maintenance. So we asked, the company's name now is iSun. It used to be Peck Electric. Now they're, I think they're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They're one of the bigger solar installers in the Northeast. Melinda and I asked them for a quote on what it would cost to hire them, contract with them essentially to do annual operation and maintenance. And they gave us a figure of $2,650. In thinking about that, that seems like a lot to me. The solar panels have essentially no moving parts. All of the equipment is under warranty. The panels have a warranty of, it's either 20 or 25 years. The other main component are inverters, and they have a warranty of either 12 or 15 years. I don't exactly recall which, but they're still well within the warranty period. So mostly what you do for annual operation and maintenance is you monitor the system to make sure that it's working correctly. That's not hard to do. You can see the output of the array on the inverter website, and if it dips, it can be set up to actually give you an alarm and tell you that it's not producing as it should be, and then it becomes a warranty item for quite some time. So $2,650 seemed like a lot to me for that level of annual maintenance. You could even, their hourly rate is $85 an hour. So that works out to be about 32 hours or 4 full days a year for doing their operation and maintenance. I think you could easily do this in one, and if you really wanted to do it, maybe 2 days of being on site to check all of the equipment. And frankly, I don't even think that's needed. So in addition to that annual maintenance, I talked to the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns as your insurer, and they gave me a quote of an extra $300 a year for your property insurance on the building. So I looked at 2 different scenarios, whether either an annual operation and maintenance fee of $1,500, somewhat arbitrary, but half of what it would be if you were to do the full boat with iSun at $2,600 plus the $300 worth of insurance. So that was the operation and maintenance assumptions that I used in the analysis. The other big number is we asked for a quote on what it would cost to take the panels off and put them back on if you had to replace the roof. It's a membrane roof. They typically have a warranty of 20 years. They could last longer or shorter, but that's typically what the warranty period is, and I think it's an appropriate thing to use in an analysis, is figuring you'll have to replace it in 20 years. And so that's within the life of the analysis. The analysis runs for 25 years from the time it was put on the roof. And so in looking at that, They gave us a price of $132,000 in today's dollars to take the panels off and put them back on. Frankly, maybe that would be what you'd want to do, but year 20 is another 13 years from now. My guess is that you'll have different decisions to make at that time. If you have to take the panels off at that time to replace the roof, you may or may not put them back on. You may put different panels back on. And frankly, I would recommend that you actually do another analysis at that time, because I think you have a different decision point to make at that time. But in the analysis, I just assumed that you were taking them off and putting them back on, and use the quote that ISON gave us. And then the third variable is inflation. And mostly I'd say, I don't know. Good luck figuring that out. I mean, right now inflation is very high. But what I used in the analysis was a 3% inflation rate. What I used back in 2016 was 2.5%, and that was based on historical numbers. I did look back in 2016. I looked back over 20 or 25 years, and like electric rates are somewhere around 2.5%, something like that, as well as the general inflation. This time I used 3%, and I also did it at 5%. So those are the variables. Ironically, the higher the inflation is, the better your return, because the value of the electricity goes up as well. So when I did all of that, and I think you have in front of you, you have various different spreadsheets to reflect those assumptions and how they play out over the life of the analysis. It looks to me that the worst you could do if you bought the system is about the same as what you're getting now. A little bit better, but about the same return over that period of time. And if you chose any other assumption, if you chose to do some of that operation and maintenance and monitoring and evaluating, if you did it any other way than to hire an outside contractor to do that much work, you could essentially double the return on investment from just leaving it the way it is now, leaving your arrangement the way it is now. So I don't know if that's clear. I'd be happy to answer any questions and help you walk through it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And for the board, I labeled your two spreadsheets, scenario 1 and scenario 2. Scenario 1 looks at the higher operating and maintenance costs of the $3,000, and scenario 2 looks at the lower number and calculating those bottom lines.
I'm sure somebody must have some questions.
I thought we were going to go through these sheet by sheet, but no?
We can if you'd like.
Okay. Well, I had a little bit, hey Jeff, how are you?
Hi,
good. I had a little bit of trouble understanding when I'm looking at the projected expenses for remove the panels and inverter replacements, where the two numbers are listed up above, 132 for the removed panels, 132K, and 11.3 for the inverter replacement, but then down below, is that adjusted for inflation?
Yes. What you're not seeing there is you're not seeing the column of numbers. It's annual inflation, on year over year.
I just was surprised with inflation that the 132 would go up to almost 200,000.
Yeah, inflation's a funny thing.
I guess so. Yes. Okay. I mean, that was pretty much it.
Other questions?
I mean, it really is up to us to look at those bottom line numbers. And see if we're comfortable with those.
Yeah, I think it is. I think I think to my mind, it's a matter of risk. If you do nothing, then you have a pretty predictable rate of return, but it's not a lot. It's like $2,500 a year. It's 10% of the value of the electricity that's coming out. And you have the opportunity of bumping that. If you buy it outright, you'll have more like a $25,000 a year return, almost. Yeah, almost. Over the life of the system. So there's a variety of ways you could look at that. If you're you could look at it as if you invest $125,000 in 5 years, you break even, and the system could have a life of 50 years. There's solar panels that just went out of the solar system past Pluto that have been up in there for over 50 years. There's not a lot that go wrong with them. They do degrade a little bit, and I did take that into consideration, that they degrade about 0.5% a year. But you still got a long ways to go before that's nothing.
I have solar panels on my roof, but I don't think they were made by NASA. And Jeff, I'm not as you know, I'm not an economist at all. When I look at the purchase in 7 years versus purchase in 15 years, I mean, it seems to be you're not recommending purchasing in 15 years.
I would.
Yeah. So it's really, are we going to purchase it after 7 years or not purchase it at all?
That would be my recommendation, in part because when this was originally put on, the net metering rules, what creates the return on the kilowatt hours that are produced was considerably different. The Public Utilities Commission has backed off on its enthusiasm for net metering, and they've really ratcheted down the rate. At the time, you had net metering. The concept is a retail rate for the electricity that's produced from your system. The reason it's called net, it's like running your meter backwards, sort of. It's an accounting exercise, but it sort of works that way. At the time, in addition to the retail rate, they added a 4% adder that, in addition to the retail rate, to encourage more people to do this net metering stuff. And it worked. It's worked quite well. It was probably the most effective renewable energy policy that we've had. So if you purchase it in year 7, you still have 3 years left of that. And it's not nothing. It adds up quite a bit. So there's a real advantage to purchasing it now versus in purchasing in year 15, because after that solar adder drops off in year 10. So year 15, year 15, the numbers look quite a bit different.
Okay, so is that why we see the decrease in the value from 2000, trying to read across correctly, it looks from 2025 to 2026?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so that's the solar adder.
Yeah. In terms of having good information, I don't know what else we need.
Other questions from members of the board? It was a little scary looking at the figure with when you're replacing the roof and everything else on it. But so the Energy Committee and you as the consultant both recommend that we sell at the end of 7 years, or buy it at the end of 7 years.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and the Energy Committee, that's their recommendation as well, because purchasing the array helps the town achieve its energy goals at relatively low risk, and gives the town a little more flexibility around when it comes time to replace the roof, and having some options about, whether you want to replace it with a new system or just take it down and not replace it, and just allows more flexibility for that. And just the Energy Committee feels strongly that the town should be leading by example in, trying to increase the amount of renewable energy generated in the town.
Other questions tonight?
Sorry, just as I look at this, Jeff, your spreadsheet shows purchasing it after 7 years starts in 2022, which I assume is this calendar year. Is that the way?
It's 2023, actually.
2023?
Yes.
Yes, now I see how, okay. So that would be in, I guess I'm asking it from the question of when we're budgeting to purchase it. So we already are in fiscal year 2023, which means our budget has been set until at least the end of June.
The piece with this, if you wanted to use the unspent bond proceeds, that's a separate action or question for the voters, so that's a pool of money that needs to be allocated. So if it were something that those funds were utilized, I would view it as outside of the year's budget.
Okay. What I was getting at is this something we are considering in this year's budget? And as I kind of was talking and listening to you, I'm concluding the answer is yes.
Yeah, I would, if you want to, the timeline to exercise the option, we'd have to let them know by June. So if it's something where we need to warn the question for the bond proceeds, it would have to happen this March if that was the pool of money the board wanted to use.
Okay.
I think you purchased it in October,
Right.
is my recollection. So, when you're talking 2023, I'm thinking October 2023 is when your opportunity will be.
Okay.
It's all relative, whichever year, that's where year 7 is in October 2023, I think.
And really my point is it this budget or a future budget where we're, have to make the commitment, if you will?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it's this budget. The bad news about this budget, of course, is it's a tough budget year. Okay.
But the other piece there too, these funds, you think about the bond proceeds, they're a separate pool of funds.
Right. Okay.
That you're looking at that wouldn't flow into the operating budget per se, or the capital budget.
So it wouldn't impact the tax rate.
Correct.
That's good news.
My recollection when I think I've worked with your previous town manager, Rick.
Remember him?
Yeah. He mentioned that the Public Works building, when you built it, came in under budget. And that there was money left over from that. And that was, one of the I don't know if that's the bond proceeds that you have, but it makes a certain amount of sense. I think what he said at the time is you have a hard time spending that on things other that are not related to that building in some fashion. So this is related to that building, and I think that's what's the thinking back at the time in 2016.
Okay.
Anything else?
Terry, if I may, I just had a question for Jeff, Jeff Forward.
Yes, please.
With the net metering credits, we've essentially applied them to our GMP bills to date, and thinking about the cash flow here, where if that's always the case, we're decreasing our bill cost. With the net metering rules, is there a way to receive that more cash in hand versus just decreasing your bill?
No. So the way that the net metering credits are monetized is they're good for a year. They're good for 12 months. If you accrue more, and on any individual account actually, if you accrue more net metering credits than you use, consume in electricity, you get a bank. You get essentially what would have been a negative bill. And those can build up for a year, but you've got to have a positive bill within a year. So one of the reasons that municipalities are attractive for net metering projects is you have a lot of electric accounts. And you can spread them over many different electric accounts. You can't use them for street lights, but you can use them for buildings. Water pumps, wastewater treatment plants use a lot of electricity. So, it is worth looking at. It certainly was in PAC's best interest to look at that. But you should be looking at your bills and seeing that, you don't build up too much of a bank that you can't use up. Solar produces it produces 3/4 of its energy during the fall and the summer. And in the winter months, the 6 months during the winter, it only produces about 1/4 of its output. So what tends to happen is in the summertime you overproduce, then you have credits, and then in the wintertime you catch back up.
Essentially, what happens here is we get billed for our power use, and then we get the bill reduced by these credits that are produced. So just trying to keep in mind of the cash flow aspect, where the town's not getting a check every month with this amount of money. So it's savings on the utility bill.
Mm-hmm.
So to monetize that, we would just have to think about that and account for it for the value over time.
So the effect will be is that your utility budget will go down. You'll invest this money and your utility budget will go down.
Okay. And that concept you just talked about, Jeff, is the town has enough accounts to spread this over that we won't end up having that a positive bill, having a situation where we won't have a positive bill in a year.
It is worth paying attention to. One of the things that I noticed is I did, in order to average, to figure out what your average production was, which was a little bit less than what they anticipated when they put it in. But in order to figure that out, whoever's tracking your utility bills does a really good job of it. And he or she had a very good spreadsheet of exactly what it's producing, how much it's worth, what the credits are. And that's what you need to do, because you don't want to get underwater, because it's hard to dig yourself back out. But you have what appears to be plenty of accounts to do that by. This is not really, a lot of money on electricity compared to probably what you spend, I would think.
Just to add to that, I calculated that the solar array on the DPW garage and the town hall fields produce about 40% of the town's electricity.
Yeah, there you go.
That includes like the buildings, the pump stations, basically all the accounts.
You got plenty of room to grow.
So that raises an interesting question. I don't know where I'm going with this question, but some of those pumps that we are used electricity for are under enterprise accounts because they're water or wastewater department, versus the town, which is there anything I need to know about that, or is that just a non-issue?
That's a good point. As we look at this further and look to potentially add to our solar generation capacity, thinking about those enterprise versus general funds, but pump stations are a big user, our sewer pump stations, we spread them around.
So I can see where the advocates for the water or the sewer departments are saying, wait, most of that money should go to us, if you will. We get a credit, because they're smaller than the town population, the folks who are on. Right. So
I could see a board policy at some point of how we allocate those credits. As we start to get more of them, it might be something for the board to think about how you allocate them between the general fund and the enterprise funds.
But kudos on the 40%. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Anything else for Jeff forward?
No, thank you. Nice job, Jeff.
Yeah.
We'll
Thank you both.
need to make a firm decision on this sometime between now and the end of January. So you'll see it back on the agenda at some time, hopefully in the near future.
Jeff, how do you find being on the select board in Richmond?
Loads of fun. I've got nothing better to do, I guess.
Wow. Fun, huh?
It's surprising, I've been involved in and worked with select boards and school boards a long time. I was on the school board, and I've been involved in town politics for a long time. And I'm surprised at how much work it is. It really is, it's daunting. So I'm still trying to catch up. It's my first term. I'll figure out a way to balance my time.
Yep.
I hope you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see
Good
you.
night. Thanks. So we're at the Energy and Community Development Planner update, and Melinda, well, Eric, you're gonna lead off, and then Melinda will take over.
Yeah, just briefly, I think, Melinda, you haven't been to the board meeting since you're accepting the new role, I don't think, so.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, so Melinda's back, longtime conservation planner. She stepped into our new role of energy and community development planner, the new position the board approved last year. And she's doing a great job stepping into this new position for the town. We had some transitions in the department as we promoted Simon Miles to fill a conservation planner position, and we hired a new planning technician, Andrew Plum, late in the summer. So we had a staff member sharing duties. So the last couple of months, Melinda's had more time to really jump into her new role here. I thought it'd be a good time for the board to just hear an update of all the work she's been doing in the energy front, affordable housing front, and transportation. So there's number of different things.
Yeah.
So I know your memo focuses on energy here.
Yeah, so I did not include updates on community development activities. I anticipate probably appearing in front of you at some point to provide that update on housing and community development work, but today is just focused on energy. So so basically, I have been, since mid-April, engaged in staffing the Energy Committee and providing guidance for their role, helping them develop a work plan. The Energy Committee has really been amazing in their efforts. They have largely focused on community outreach in the first 6 months of their appointment as a board. They've been publishing articles in the Observer, monthly articles for the Living Green section. They've been setting up a table at farmers market several times last summer and talking to people there. And they've been participating in town events. And they coordinated Williston's first EV Fest last October 1st, which was a real success with over 75 people attending and over 18 people with their electric vehicles there to share information with people. So the Energy Committee is really, they're really engaging the community, and they're providing a lot of information. They are themselves very highly educated in the energy field, and just extremely bright and dedicated. So I feel honored to be working with them. The Energy Committee has also looked at potential locations for EV chargers, and I've helped them map out locations. And they've been looking at the town capital improvement program and developing some recommendations for the inclusion of energy efficiency into that program. And as you saw here, also developing recommendations for the potential purchase of the solar array. So the committee has developed a 2-year work plan, basically reviewing actions in the energy plan and prioritizing those according to what I would call a ratio of effort to impact. So in other words, just really choosing those actions that will have the most impact for the lowest amount of effort as the low-hanging fruit, and prioritizing those. So largely that's been outreach, which is great. And then myself, besides staffing the Energy Committee, I have been gathering a lot of information on the town's energy usage in town buildings, and sort of documenting that in a program called Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is an online platform that's provides a lot of information on trends over time and energy use intensity. So I've learned a lot from that. And I reviewed the 2009, 2010 energy audits for the town buildings, and I've been putting together information as far as what retrofits have been done in those buildings and how they track with those audits. The town has been doing a lot to implement the recommendations in those audits with respect to the town buildings. And I did participate in a walkthrough last spring with Efficiency Vermont to look at ways that the town could save energy in town buildings. And based on their recommendations, we looked at a lighting plan to retrofit lighting in the police station, the fire station, and the annex, and got an estimate from a local contractor to do that work. That's been included in the town's capital improvement program budget. I've also been compiling data on the solar generation at the 2 arrays that the town, one that the town owns and one the town leases. The array at the town hall fields produces over 200,000 kilowatt hours annually and yields an average of 33,000 annual net metering credits. And then we've already talked about the array in the Public Works garage. And then I've also been working with some energy developers, renewable energy developers, on exploring the potential options for community solar in Williston. And then we are also working on some sustainable transportation initiatives. We got some funding through Vermont AOT to conduct a feasibility study for microtransit service in Williston, which is essentially a demand-based service of smaller vehicles to get people from the more rural areas in Williston to Taft Corners, where the fixed route bus service is. That work has not yet begun. We're still waiting on we're still waiting to see a grant agreement from VTrans, but as soon as we have it, we can get going on that. The town has also been working with CCRPC and Stantec to assess the feasibility of a proposed multimodal hub in Taft Corners on a piece of town-owned land in Maple Tree Place. So that would be sort of kind of a mini transit station, that includes some facilities for bike storage and park and ride. And we've been talking with GMT during this process, and they've been very supportive of a multimodal hub there. And also, I want to say, the town is currently kind of planning for an upgrade to the town hall parking lot. And I think there's an opportunity there to really use that parking lot as more of a public facility for to incorporate some park and ride spaces, potentially public EV charging, bike storage facilities. So the planning department will be working with Public Works and the contractor to develop plans for the parking lot that will hopefully include some amenities such as that. And then finally, we will continue to look at bylaw amendments that further energy goals. The Taft Corners form-based code supports the town energy goals because it promotes energy efficiency through building form, i.e. more building stories, more dense development, means fewer exterior walls. It also means more units, more dense development, mixed uses, so that people live near where they want to go shopping and want to go do stuff. reduce parking requirements, encourage other forms of transportation, and the goal is to make Taft Corners a place that's pleasant to walk in, and that will also encourage other forms of transportation than single occupancy vehicle transportation. And then, okay, I'll try to speed up the rest of this because I know you're busy. So we did also receive a small grant from Vermont Council on Rural Development to do some outreach regarding the Inflation Reduction Act and the funding that will be made available through that for residential energy improvements. So the hope is that we will be able to do outreach to the most energy burdened households in Williston, really target that outreach to those who need the most help in kind of making their homes more energy efficient and saving money on their energy bills. And there will be other funding opportunities available next year. There's actually quite a lot of funding available. So our job will be to figure out the most effective way to use that money. We were recently notified that the town is going to receive $75,000 in direct funding from the Department of Energy, provided that we submit a plan that meets their criteria for how we're going to use that money to further our energy goals. There's quite a bit of flexibility in that funding, and there's a lot of potential projects that it could be used for. So I will be working with the Energy Committee and with Eric to kind of come up with a list of high priority projects, and I'm sure that you will be seeing hearing about that again and seeing it. And then there may be an opportunity for additional funding through the state's Municipal Energy Resilience Program. Grants of up to $500,000 will be available for approved projects for weatherization, thermal efficiency, replacing fossil fuel heating systems with more efficient renewable or electric heating systems in town buildings. Note that because Williston is not considered an energy burdened community overall, we're probably not, it's kind of a long shot for that funding, but nonetheless, we'll still look at it and probably apply for it.
What is an energy burdened community?
So the state has done an analysis town by town of energy burden. And essentially what that means is that a town is considered energy burdened if the majority of residents, I guess what they did is they consider a town energy burdened if the majority of residents are spending more than a certain percentage of their income on heating and cooling and transportation energy. And I think Williston was ranked as like one of the lowest energy burden communities in the state, so.
Interesting.
Questions, comments?
No, good job.
No, yeah, very impressed.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
So glad that we have you doing this and that our town's leading the way, and that you're leading the way for us.
Well, I feel lucky to have the job, so.
You've done a lot in a short period of time, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Melinda.
All right, then we'll move on to the Dorothy Alleyne Memorial Library update. I'm looking for the Director of Libraries, Shane Kearns, and the new President of the Board, Charity Clark. So welcome, and this is always my favorite report to get because it's always upbeat and so many brand new things to talk about. So take it away.
I almost touched the microphone and I got the evil eye over here for don't touch the microphone. Thank you. I'm Charity Clark. I was recently late to a board meeting and now I'm the chair. So that's why I'm here tonight. You know, I appreciate Terry saying what a pleasure it is to have the library come in and testify, if you will, before you, because you can imagine what a pleasure it is to be on the board. We all of us, we are elected members to 5-year terms, and I mean, I think we all just love getting to talk about the books that we're reading and what's going on in the library. We provide such an incredible, variety of programs. I live in the village myself, and my daughter and I skied to the library on Friday because it was a snow day, and that's how we, spend our time. And as a parent, I know we use the library so often to help with parenting, and I see other parents there. We're so fortunate to have this library really as one of the hubs of our community. In the village, I think it probably is the hub of our community. One thing that Jane will be touching on is that we, of course, live in a growing town. It's very large. It's one of the largest towns in the state, and we have a pretty small library considering the size of the town, and the staff is incredible. They're creative. They use the tools that they have to excellent effect. The bookmobile alone it's incredible. The program, especially during the pandemic, but even still getting into the community, into neighborhoods, into the senior communities. Folks who are homebound for a couple of months can, have someone drop off books for them, whatever they need. And of course, the Library of Things is always a fascination. You can get a ukulele at the library, and many other really cool things. One of the items in the budget that I wanted to highlight is we currently have an assistant director of the library who's part-time and has been for many years. She's been there forever. And it's, I think, time for us to be right-sizing the staff and the services that we're providing the town. We have this incredibly capable staff, but we have a tiny library with a pretty small staff. And as Williston has grown, it's time to make sure that that great library and great staff is a sustainable thing going forward and has the tools and the resources they need to be successful, and to make sure that those in Williston who are enjoying the library and have the opportunity to enjoy the library continue to have that, so that we can have a strong library going forward for all of us, for seniors, for children, for people who are skiing on a snow day to the library, and for people seeking jobs and all the many folks who use our library. We're so lucky. So I'm kind of like the main hype girl about the library, so I'm going to stop talking because I could just keep going and let Jane tell you in more detail what we have in mind and what we've been working on.
Great. So Eric, if you could hit that link. Thanks, Charity. And I'm happy to say we were fully open on the snow day. We closed a half hour early, but a lot of libraries jumped the gun and closed, so I'm glad you were able to ski over. Thanks. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the trends and challenges we've had at the library over the last year. One of the things, we now have over 4,400 patrons, and that's a number that goes up and down as we purge the database. But one thing we've started looking at more closely is new patrons added each year. And you can see in FY22, there was quite a jump, even from pre-pandemic. So we are welcoming new people in town, and we're happy to see them coming in and getting cards. Part of that increase is also you can apply for a library card online now. So I think, both factors, but clearly the town is growing. As Charity mentioned, we're also, returning back to normal. Our patron visits are still not what they were pre-pandemic. People, especially the seniors, are still a little hesitant about coming in, some of them, but we are getting closer to normal. Our circulation is almost back to pre-pandemic levels, so it's very strong. And if you scroll down a little bit, Eric, please, thank you. Our e-resource usage is a subset of our circulation, and you can see the trend is growing, accessing ebooks and streamed audiobooks. Not as steep a trend as during the pandemic, but I expect that trend to continue. So if you go down a little bit, Eric, these stats from the Department of Libraries just came out from FY21 comparing all of Vermont's libraries. Williston ranks 13, the 13th largest community in FY21. And a couple of data points that we really were very strong in is, one is programming. So we ranked 5th in the state for attendance at our programs, and that's up from 7th in FY20. So people, especially our youth programs, but all our programs are very well attended. Our collection use, we rank 8th in the state. A subset of that is our print collection, which ranks 6th. The real standout here is the circulation of our youth collection, which is 4th in the state. And that's pretty impressive. There's some pretty big libraries that we're up against, and our young, young families are really using the library heavily. So if we could go down. Thanks, Eric. Obviously, our ongoing challenge is space, and we try and be creative with how we're working with what we have. The town green has been wonderful. People love having programs out there. This was the watershed program that is pictured. And if you scroll down, Eric, the other program that we had I guess it was in the spring, is the 802 reptiles, which was supposed to be outside, but it was too cold for the reptiles. So I don't know if anybody here attended that. It was definitely capacity for our community room and our family room. You can see people were overflowing. So anyway, we meet the challenge. We spruced up our patio a little bit, and a lot of the groups are enjoying meeting out there as well. The other way we meet the challenge is we take the library outside the walls of the library and meet the community where they are. You may recall in FY21, the outreach position expanded to 25 hours, and Sarah Hibbler has really hit the pavement with this and really reached different community groups. So she visits 4 senior communities every month and 5 preschools, and she'll do story times and book talks, and sometimes it's just drop off. But she also visits homebound patrons, between 10 and 20 a month. So that's, someone may have had hip surgery, and they'll call to see if they can renew their books, and we'll offer, we can come to your house. And that's a real lifeline for some people. And obviously Dottie is our most visible symbol going around town. We went to 14 neighborhoods this summer, and we rearranged the route a little bit to, we always look at the number of visits. Some communities are aging a little bit and some are younger, so we redid the route to meet that need. We also visit Allenbrook School on Wednesdays. We visited the Part 2 camps would come on board, and we went to the farmers market and several special events. So you can see there was quite a big jump, 36% of visits from last summer. So that's in part because of the special events and also redoing the routes. So that's a quick recap of where we are in the library this year.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Space issues. Let's talk about that.
Okay, let's.
What do I need to know?
What do you need to know? Well, we're very excited about the scoping study getting started, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what Black River Design brings back. From the first step of that was an assessment of the library space. So the engineers came through, I think about 4 weeks ago, and looked at everything, electrical, plumbing, and structure. So it'll be very interesting to see what they say. As far as what we need in space, that'll be part of the process as well. There's a library consultant, Marisol, who is an expert who will help us evaluate what we need. But definitely, more spaces, smaller spaces for smaller meetings, more space for the collection so it's accessible. A lot of our books are out of reach for someone even my height, and at the bottom level aren't accessible either. You can't get through the stacks with a wheelchair or a walker, some of them. So there's a lot of, it feels very compressed.
Okay. Do you have thoughts? I mean, I realize this is speculative and you really want to wait, but should it be in the same location, a bigger library, same location? Is our town at a point where we maybe should have 2 libraries? Does a more main and maybe a more remote library make sense? What other uses of the library might you contemplate that I might not even be able to, envision?
Well, I can answer that last part first. That's the easy part. The rest, I kind of have to be Switzerland here, Jeff, and and let the scoping study and what the community wants, is so crucial in this. And obviously, I don't want to, I want that to be open. But as far as things that you might not have imagined, makerspace where there's 3D printers and Cricut machines and computers for gaming. There's all sorts of different things you're seeing in libraries. A video space. We're just doing a podcast series related to the Vermont Reads. And Bonnie, we have a 2-way microphone, but a recording studio, there might be people in town who want to come in and use that. Charity was envious of Richmond lending snowshoes, which we don't have room to store the snowshoes to loan. So there's the library of things, which might not be things you would imagine a library would get into. So yeah, it's not the same as it was, and it's an exciting.
It's not your old library.
Exactly, yeah. It's a community space, a collection.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear from the perspective of that scoping study is not only looking at library space, but
Right.
community space. And what I'm hearing from you is that you see a connection, and maybe a strong connection between the library and its services and programs with a more community-based space.
Yeah, I think we are functioning as a community space now to some extent. Obviously,
Sure.
we can't fill the full need in the space we have. So clearly, yeah, there's overlap there and potentials for, multi-purpose spaces.
Sorry. I don't know how to shut it. Shut it up.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. I think
Thank you.
there's probably a couple other people in the room that remember the oldest part of the library, just the Vermont room and the old brick structure that still exists in the front. So it's certainly grown since I moved into town. So, but great progress. So thank you all. Thank you for the members of the Board of Trustees that are here tonight as well. So we appreciate all of your efforts.
I'm sorry, I did have one, just
Go ahead.
if I ask. I see in your, in the budget where you discussed the new the position expanding from part-time, the assistant librarian from part-time to full-time. What else do you want me to know about the budget?
About okay, you want me to jump into the
Well,
budget?
we're going to be going directly into the budget presentation as soon as this presentation is done.
Oh,
So that
sure,
would be
I guess that's.
Yeah,
more
because
appropriate time.
that's the answer to.
Okay, sure.
So anyway, thank you, and we'll start now with the budget presentation, and operating budget is the first. You don't have too much in the line of capital expenses. I think only one.
Just the one bookmobile.
Right. So if we can go through the operating expenses of your budget, that would be great.
So with the exception of department salary, the budget request presents line items that are essentially level funded or slightly increased for rise in inflation. Obviously, the major request in this budget is to make the assistant director position full-time, moving from the current part-time 28 hours a week to 40 hours with benefits. We're going to be very sad to say goodbye to Debbie Roeder, the assistant director, who has been, I believe, in that position since 1987. And I was trying to find out from her if the first couple of years, maybe she had a different title, but, so 36 years. As sad as we are, we have to look at the transition in April and feel that this would be a good time to move that position to full-time, which is more appropriate for a grade 7 position that is would be in a leadership, or is in a leadership role. This, after the director, it's the most senior position in the library. So the current duties performed by the assistant director include cataloging, book processing, so basically, overseeing the book from the box to the shelf, audiobook and periodical collection development, library safety and emergency procedure, statistical gathering and reporting to the state, and management of operations when I'm not there. So as you can imagine, the volume of work has increased and changed a lot since 1987. Meeting the current job responsibilities of the position has been a challenge for several years as a part-time position. The part-time hours preclude the assistant director from taking on some of the supervisory and administrative support duties that are in the job description, specifically supervising the students, the substitutes, training them, and administrative duties like scheduling the staff and the community room, which is being heavily used by outside groups as well. So basically, I am doing those functions now, and my supervisory load with 3 full-time staff, our 5 part-time, 4 students, and a team of subs is very high. And it detracts from meeting with employees one-on-one and from focusing on higher level duties like strategic planning and long-term planning. Also, having a part-time staff member stepping in as director is problematic because problems arise 5 days a week, and it's not. It doesn't always work out that well. Does that answer your question?
Sure. So you've known for a while that the retirement would happen. What are your thoughts about, the issue becomes in the current budget, there isn't enough, because it wasn't anticipated to go to full-time when you're hiring this new staff person. So how would that work? Let's say we did, as part of the budget we're considering now, agree with the full-time, moving it to full-time. In terms of hiring the new person, which I assume you're going to start either soon, because you'll want to fill it soon after April, right after, or maybe even have some overlap. I don't know how that might work for you. But yet the budget wouldn't be large enough to support the full-time person until sometime after July 1st. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I did think of that, and I think we could manage to July 1st, and
so somebody would come on after July 1st.
Yeah,
okay,
or come on part-time, and if it worked for them.
Okay,
you
could structure the position that way, the hiring that. Okay, all right.
So just a few other things in the operation. So the remaining lines, it cover inflation and a 3% overall increase. So obviously the salary and benefits was the big piece here. Our largest line at 87,000 is books, and I'm requesting only a 1% increase to cover the increased usage of electronic resources. A small increase to small equipment, 1,000 to cover inflation, and also to replace some office furniture, which has reached the end of its life. And in building overhead, the other increase would be maintenance and repair, asking for another 2,500. As the building has aged, I'm finding each year that things go wrong, and having these extra funds to address those issues is included.
That looks like it covered it pretty well.
Sorry?
It covered it very well as far as the major things that are, increases that are happening. So any questions for Jane on the operating budget?
No, not the operating.
Okay. So you had one item under the capital budget, and that was, I think, the bookmobile.
Yes. So the request is for 8,700 to put toward the replacement of the bookmobile at a $90,000 replacement cost. So this is assuming 12 years of use with replacement in fiscal year 28.
We started this one essentially after we got the new bookmobile. So,
We did, yeah.
Right.
And then we had one gap in FY '22 that we didn't set any money aside, and then increased for the remaining years.
Right.
It's page 91 in your
91,
capital
okay.
budget.
We constantly have this problem of trying to catch up, because with what page we're on.
No, I'm sorry, I don't even have page numbers, Jeff, so. But if there were any other line items too that you wanted more details on, I'm happy to.
That was the only one that I noticed in here, and
So this is simply to start building the fund to replace the bookmobile,
Yes.
replace Dottie.
Yeah, we have about $40,000 in that capital savings account right now, so we're about halfway there.
Okay. Yeah,
any further questions?
not much to talk about there.
If not, thank you very much, and we appreciate you being here tonight.
Yeah.
Thank
Great
you.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the fire department, with Chief Collette.
I was hoping they were all going to stay to support the fire department.
Get your presentation up, Chief.
Sure.
Nah, what a great picture.
All set?
Yep, all set.
Great. So it's my honor to sit here in front of you tonight to present the fiscal year 24 budget proposal. When we prepare a budget, I know, and you'll see in my letter of transmittal, which was no different than any other department head that sat in front of you so far, this is a tough one. As we all know, right, we know that when we go to the grocery store, we know that when we're fueling up our vehicles and paying our bills in our daily lives. So we went into this budget with that lens because we know that this potentially cascades to the daily lives of the citizenry. The first photo here is appropriate, and then we'll skip into the next photo as well, is that when we look at the fire department budget, the most valuable resource that you have in your fire department budget is the people, right? And that human capital. And so I really want to acknowledge the work of the staff here. This was the gathering for Lieutenant Soper, the day, his last day on shift here at the fire department. Next slide, please. And this is the result of town meeting earlier this year when the community supported the addition of this 9 staff. And for those of you that remember the presentation that we updated you on earlier this fall, what that 9 staff has done for us is allowed us to decrease our request for mutual aid. So any calls that are coming into the community, now we're able to address them more readily, and I'll go into that a little bit further here in the presentation. But next slide, please. So some of the trends and major issues here was the addition of the 9 staff. What we've seen as a result of that is the average request for mutual aid, both for fire and EMS responses into the community, was over 20 incidents per month. And as I presented, like I said earlier, this fall, we saw that effect be realized in July when the 9 new staff went on, and the request for mutual aid dropped to 4. We saw that in August rise up to 11, but then in September it dropped down to 4 again. Just today, I pulled the data for the following 2 months. October, we're back down at 8, and in November, we're down at 6 requests for mutual aid. So what does that mean for us? What that means for us is that we're able to address the concurrent EMS call, and as a result of that, we actually have seen an increase in ambulance revenue because that patient is being transported by our own ambulance, or the backup ambulance. So that's something that we've taken into consideration in the budget proposal for FY24. The operational changes that we see here is the ability to staff a tanker for rural water supply in remote areas, rural areas of the community that are not protected by a hydrant system, and the ability to staff the aerial ladder truck, which was obviously a big addition to the department. But our ability to actually run more people to an emergency call with in a safe operational or a safer operational posture, that has we're directly benefiting from that addition. What we see as a continued challenge is the recruitment of and retention of call staff members. Despite creative opportunities, creative recruitment strategies, we had a number of applications come in, and we continue to see that ebb and flow as people discover really what it means to be committed to an on-call position in the fire department. So that averages we have about 6 active staff in the call staff right now, despite our efforts to try to recruit people. Just life continues to get in the way for them to serve back because of the demands of the position. Next slide, please. Looking at EMS revenue, when we are fully staffed, and so we've had some challenges recently because we haven't been fully staffed with Lieutenant Soper's retirement and other medical illness within the department. That's why I think we saw those rises here over October and November. But what we have been able to do is see more ambulance transports through our own service, which has resulted in more revenue. The projections for FY24 for ambulance revenue will likely exceed $490,000, which is about a $100,000 projection increase of where we were in 23. What works hand in hand with that is the ambulance agency assessment of 3.3%, which will increase that to about $16,000, which is a fee that's set by the state. We have no ability to impact that. So as call volume goes up, our contribution goes hand in hand with that. Next slide, please. The call staff wages for FY23 were in excess of $70,000 as we budgeted it. When we look at FY24, we took a hard look at this, and we're just not seeing the participation. And so we feel comfortable that we can reduce that budget by $30,000 to take that down, because we just aren't, they're not people that are showing up, and if they are, our expenses very low for the rate that we're reimbursing them at. So there's it's a double-edged sword. We don't have people that are on the call staff, but in the backside of that, we actually save $30,000 in that call staff budget. Next slide, please. This is the trend. I know you've seen this trend line before, and that red line continues to dip down. The September-November rise that you see really at the end was again a result of our recruitment, where we tried to put some extra staff on. We saw that number go up, but then we've had more resignations of the call staff since then. So I expect that will continue to go down here in December. And of note, this is call staff payroll. This is the payroll hours, right? Next slide, please. The advantage of having sophisticated fire apparatus, these modern fire trucks, and having extra staff on hand to staff the units is, it's costing us more to run them. It's costing us more in fuel costs because we're actually, now remember that essentially 1 year ago, we only had the ability to send in a single engine on a fire response with the ambulance. So we were really running 2 trucks. And now on average to a fire response, we're running 2 fire apparatus in addition to the ambulance. We also have incurred, we have to maintain that training and familiarity. So those units are getting run daily and trained on daily. So we've seen an increase in the fuel budget. So yes, we have a better operational force. What we didn't expect is to see diesel fuel jump to where the prices are today. And that reflects in the FY24 budget. Next slide, please. An amendment in the turnout gear. So we're doing bulk purchasing. We know that annually we have to purchase on a replacement plan 7 sets of personal protective equipment, which is the turnout gear that you see here as an example, to maintain that because the turnout gear has a 10-year lifespan. So that 7 sets is our rotation to keep everyone in a set that's compliant within 10 years of its manufacture date. What we have done, though, is any of the turnout gear that didn't hit that $10,000 capital threshold, so that would be a set of gear that got damaged or something that we didn't anticipate that fell outside of the capital schedule, we've kicked that back into the operating budget and removed it from the capital budget. And surely, I believe that was cut by the auditors as a best practice to make sure that we're doing that correctly. What other costs associated with maintaining that equipment is the request for an extractor. We applied for a Fire Act grant to replace, an extractor is a fancy word for a commercial washing machine for turnout gear. So
That's the extractor?
that's the extractor right there, the silver machine right there that you see in the photo.
I've got kind of one at home too.
So we applied for that, and at the time of application, it was still operating. The time of the grant award, it was not operating. That dates back to when the fire station sat across the parking lot. So that machine that we have has been transitioned to the new station. It's certainly outlived its life. It had failed. And we struggled, actually Lieutenant Soper championed the work to try to get some repair company in, and now it's been, Lieutenant Prouty has taken the role of getting this in. But we've essentially put a Band-Aid fix on a machine that's on its last legs. And so we'll need to absorb that into capital in FY24. Unfortunately, it doesn't come out without a hefty price tag. That extractor is around $17,000. And then the dryer to accompany it is around $11,000.
Is that what you paid, Ted, for yours?
Yeah.
Yes.
Run down to Costco and get one.
And so what we try to do is, there's a bunch, these are sold by the pound, their pound capacity. We try to optimize it for what is makes practical sense for the fire department on our demand. So when we come back from an emergency, what can we put into that? Not to get too much into the weeds, but you can only wash the outer shells of the gear together, and then you have to wash the inner liners together because one is more aggressive, it'll break down the other, and it will destroy the lifespan of it. So you have to do multiple wash cycles, and for all of our staff, we tried to match those two so they complement one another.
And sorry, I know this is a naive question. You have to do this to this equipment. It's not like my ski coat that never gets washed. This stuff has to get washed.
Yeah, so it's a matter of safety, right? It's a matter of firefighter safety. So any fire response we go on, we assume that that's been contaminated with a carcinogen, and we don't want that on for the next call. And it's not fair to, one, it's not fair for our firefighters, but it's also not fair for our public. We shouldn't be going on the next call with cancer on our gear and coming into people's homes. So when we come back from a fire, actually, we don't even leave the scene. We'll bag our equipment at the fire scene into a plastic bag so it doesn't come back into the cab of the truck with us, and then it goes in line and sits in queue at the extractor. earlier this year when we did have the failure, we were actually, our current extractor, we were going and shipping a gear over, and we're doing it at Essex Junction Fire Station because ours had broken. So, yeah, it's a safety issue. That's why we issue 2 sets of gear. So when that contaminated set is in queue to be laundered, and that's the need for the dryer, right? We could sit it out and we could have that gear there, but who's to say that if you run back-to-back incidents, you need to have a cycle where you can get it back in relatively quickly. So that's why there's a dryer to complement the extractor.
Okay, and this is just common equipment at fire stations?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
What was it 25 years ago? Absolutely not. But the science has dictated, the science has led us to say it's unsafe. It's unsafe.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Funding for regional dispatch was in here. Regional dispatch had projected the same cost that we're paying into Shelburne Dispatch now. And I know that you've been apprised of the update that just came out earlier this week about regional dispatch. Suffice it to say, wherever this lands, we feel that the budget will either, wherever the agency will be, the amount of money we're going to have to spend is equal. So you'll see that either the price we pay for Shelburne Dispatch or for regional dispatch in the operational budget is still $58,000 annually. And that's what they had bid for us.
Sorry, Chief, I'm just looking at the budget, and for for dispatch services, it's showing 80,000. What am I missing?
The next slide.
We'll get it.
Okay, all right.
The next slide.
Good segue.
This is happening a lot to me tonight.
Yeah,
Just wait a second.
No worries. I'm glad that we're following along on this. So this is what comes along with it. Our records management software, so where we gather all of our data, we enter our data today into a platform called emergency reporting. That emergency reporting is a very cost-effective product. We pay less than $2,000 annually for that records management software. But with anything in today's world, emergency reporting got bought up by a larger company called ESO. ESO is sunsetting the emergency reporting product, so forcing us to change our vendors. We have met with 3 vendors so far and interviewed them. They range in price of greater than around $15,000 each. The vendor that we're leaning towards, the startup cost is going to be $20,000. So that we realize is a big deal. In addition to that $20,000 is the bridge from the CAD, the bridge from the records management software to link it to the computer-aided dispatch software. That's an additional $4,000. Okay, so there's your $60,000, and now we're adding another $24,000, so we're getting into that $80,000 range.
Okay.
So, and that's all under the dispatch side of the house. So where did we save? How did we save money? Next slide, please. Thank you. The command car was set to be replaced in FY24. I couldn't, in this era, in this challenging time, I couldn't see why we can't add another year and not replace that to its life. So we're going to not replace that in FY24. There's a couple of things that does for us. It allows us to actually look at alternative fuel vehicle options, i.e. an electric vehicle to replace that, if that's going to be something. It allows us to look at that. Right now, that option, I watched Bruce's presentation last week, and so I saw, right, that's really not out there yet. Giving us a year, maybe we're going to be in a better spot. So we're not going to be at any detriment, so we've kicked that expense out. The other thing that we've done, we had projected for FY24 the paving of the fire station apparatus in the parking areas and the apparatus ramp out front. Yes, it needs to be done, but is it going to break us operationally if we kick that expense out a year? No, it's not going to break us. So we have deferred that paving project to FY25. How else did we save? Our paramedic grant that we had, another Fire Act grant, we were able to purchase a 12-lead EKG monitor. So for our paramedic use, that monitor, we had it budgeted at $32,000. We were able to do that through grant funding, so we actually pulled that out of our needs in capital equipment. And in addition to that, when we were awarded another Fire Act grant this year, that's what we put our exhaust recovery system in. That exhaust recovery system is installed and working in the firehouse. There was leftover funds, and our managers from FEMA Region 1 on the grant award say they don't want to ever have us give anything back. So as long as our project sits within what they call their high priorities, we're able to spend that down. So we have purchased, we haven't completed the purchase yet. We have designed and have the spec award out for a new accountability system for accountability of members. And that's actually a county-wide approach where all the mutual aid partners are adopting the same accountability project. It's a simple project. There's no IT. It's essentially Velcro and tags, but it works, and it's true and tried, and it works at fire departments across the nation. And so we're moving forward with that. Right now, we have no formal accountability system outside of the ones that you see on either the deputies or my car. So this will actually have accountability command capability on both the deputy's car, the engine, and the ladder truck. So no matter what apparatus is there, we'll have some capability. So again, that's going to be grant funded. Next slide, please. Moving into capital, some of the other areas here that you see in the tabs in the budget for capital. The paving, like I said earlier, was deferred until FY25. The heating, ventilating, and air conditioning costs, we haven't looked to add any cost to that, so it's unchanged. The phone system we completed in FY23. What we'd like to do is start anticipating the replacement of that again in FY25. So we'll start putting a little bit of money away because those phone systems, as we all know, right, technology is going faster than some of our equipment is outliving its life. We heard Melinda speak earlier about the fire station LED lighting project. You see that here. That's not in the fire department budget. That's in her budget, but that's $127,000. That's the estimate by the vendor, the local vendor, to change all of our lights from their current fluorescent lights to LED lighting, and that's been deferred in the FY24 budget. So new here really is a new realization of the tab for capital budgets for buildings for the fire department. This tab is, we have to start reinvesting. You heard Jane just speak about that for the library. We hadn't had this tab here before, but it's given back to the maintenance upkeep here for some of these large projects. And what we identified in the FY24 priority is the person doors on the fire station. They're rusting out. So the frames are rusting out and the doors are rusting out. They were, as I understand it, they were sandblasted and recoated a number of years ago already. So we've already gone through the maintenance cycle, and now we need to replace them. So that's what that $15,000 capital expense is for the building.
Hopefully with something a little more durable.
We hope, right?
Yes. Okay.
We hope. So that is the end of the formal presentation. I think where we're at today is the ability for us to deliver services today for the value, the added of the personnel. I can't undersell, right? We are much more capable today than we were a year ago. So
That's good news. So are there questions on the operating budget as we reviewed it down the list that the chief may have missed? Anybody have any questions?
I'm sorry, are we gonna go through the capital budget items or no?
Well, we will,
They-
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, they were included in the slides, so the slides went, the first bout of slides were ops, and then we transitioned, the last three were in the
Yeah,
cap.
there's about 11 different things that are in the capital
Okay.
budget that we can take a look at, but if there are any questions on the operator, that's just.
Well, just one question about the department. How many fire vehicles does the department have currently?
I may get it wrong, 11,
Okay,
and that may include the trailers.
okay. And the tankers and the thing we think of when we think of a fire truck, the tankers, the ladder, what,
Yeah.
is
So-
there one called the engine?
Three engines
Yep.
and a ladder truck.
Okay, so four is, when I.
For the suppression units,
Okay, good way to think of it. All right.
2 ambulances, the utility truck, the 2 command cars, but then there's the trailers that we own, and then the UTV. So that 11 encompasses the trailers and UTV.
Okay, good, thank you. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I needed.
What a difference a year makes, though, in that a lot of those vehicles were essentially unusable this time last year, right? So now all those major capital expenses from previous budgets are being utilized.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Two things about that. One, yeah, that was the surprise of last year. You literally could not take a ladder truck to a fire that needed a ladder truck. But the other piece of it, to me, was with the firefighters was, the safety it provided to the firefighters, having that additional staff. And that, to me, was an important piece of it.
And as you saw in the October presentation, I mean, that's form follows function, right? And when you're out there, you have building fires that are auto-exposing on occupied residential buildings, and we're able to stop that because our staffing is, I mean, that alone is a testament to moving forward in the right direction.
No more questions on operating. Let's move on then to capital, and we have the capital book. And the first one that I saw that has expenditures, and you just talked about that a little bit ago, it's on page 24, the HVAC system.
So there's no change here.
Okay.
It's the same amount of money.
Same amount of money
Yeah.
in HVAC.
And page 25 is what you had just mentioned is the doors.
Correct, 15,000 for the exterior person doors.
And the next page is 26.
Sorry, can I ask a question about,
Yep.
on page 25? Is the 15,000 anticipated to be enough for the doors? In other words, the 15,000 I'm seeing for 2025 will be for other aspects?
Correct, yeah, the 24 project, if you will be the doors, and that will exhaust that 15,000.
Okay, that's your anticipation, okay.
We've already asked a vendor for a quote, and that's where that
Yeah.
number comes from.
Yeah. Terry, if you don't mind, I was just asking, are we gonna be spending 15,000 a year for 6 years on doors? And the answer is no.
So we have a list, right, so there was recommendations that came through on building
Right.
improvements outside of the maintenance costs, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what that would be for,
Okay.
moving forward in 25.
Yeah. And because it's here, I know it's true, but you anticipate $15,000 a year, at least from your perspective right now, is sufficient.
Sufficient?
Okay, I shouldn't have asked it.
I think that, as with anything, we're gonna have to look at where the costs are. It would be unfair for me to say that, and how I'll reference it is, right, the roof of the firehouse, right, over $100,000 expense. Did we anticipate needing that as soon as we did? Not necessarily, but when we evaluated it and saw the risk for not replacing it, we had to protect that infrastructure and do
Yeah.
it right.
Oh, yeah, no
So,
choice.
Yeah.
Similar to the police station, we're trying to put some money away for that as well.
Yeah.
And, if we don't have a project program, we're trying to build this fund. And then, certainly if emergencies come up, we'll fall to contingencies and blah, blah, blah.
Right, absolutely agree, yeah, okay.
Next one I had was on page 26, and that's the phone system you talked about.
Correct. No allocation in '24, but we'll resume that in FY '25.
That's right, there's nothing approved by the manager, right? And the next page I had was page 65. This is replacement of the 4x4.
Yeah, so this is the command vehicle. This is where we deferred. We did not, we will not move forward with the replacement of it in FY '24.
I had 66 is next.
66, we will be moving forward with the replacement of the 2011 pickup truck. That's the utility, that's our haul vehicle. It's also our brush fire vehicle, and currently acts as our plow. That's how we plow the station yard. So
67 is next. Defibrillator.
yeah, because we do have the 4 defibrillators here, we'll still have to have a capital replacement plan. So our liability, although we were able to score it by grant, now we'll still have to plan on the replacement of all 4. So that's where this the 16,000 stays at here for '24. And we'll pick it back up a little bit in 2025. But we're able to defer some of that cost because we were able to buy that through the grant process.
And 68 is next.
No change in this. We're just, actually, this has gone down. We actually reduced this, didn't we, Eric?
Right.
We had it
yeah,
at 8,000.
Yeah, we bumped it down.
Bumped it down just so we could lower the overhead for the year on the hydraulic tools. So also with that, the way we did this is we have currently have a grant application in to the State of Vermont Homeland Security, which will be decided here in January. And so some of the expenses for that may be picked up by a grant award, and that's for an airbag, a high-pressure airbag system. So we'll know more January or February this year, but this is anticipation of being a grant award.
I'm afraid to ask what a high-pressure airbag system is.
So they're 2 different systems in a way, but what they are is they are Kevlar bags that store flat and have the ability to lift heavy objects either in the vertical or horizontal orientation. Let's say you had a vehicle come down on top of a person and they were trapped underneath it. These airbags go in and they provide a platform. You inflate the airbag and use air pressure. It's a simple mathematical equation by the pressure per square inch, and that's what gives you the lifting capacity. And so the current bags that we have in the department are out of date. They actually have a service life and they need to be inspected. Well, ours don't comply with any of that. In fact, I don't think we can find the records on them, so they're that old. So we need to update those and replace those. Part of that is in capital. The grant application is for a much more robust system that gives us a single bag that's a new technology bag that allows us to lift greater than 2 feet with a single bag up to 34 tons.
Wow.
We did an analysis in the grant application where we've had, and I may get this wrong, it's at least 7 commercial vehicle crashes since my arrival here in the department that have involved heavy commercial vehicles. And we have limited capacity to deal with outside of the relationship with our heavy wrecker operators. So that's what the grant request was. We use, again, data to drive the decision.
Boy, I could use one of those when I change the oil in my car.
You wouldn't want to see the price tag.
Well, I kind of am looking at it when I.
So, well, not in the grant application. The
that's true.
The
Yeah,
grant,
good point.
the grant product is over 10,000 for one bag.
Wow.
Page 69 is next, the IT server.
There is no change this stays on our current track.
And page 70,
Again, no change for the fire radios.
and 71, yeah, 71.
Yeah, and that 24.5 is that 7 sets of turnout gear that we budget.
Right.
Okay.
72,
No change.
scuba, and
It's
then
the SCBA compressor.
the last one is 73, according to my book.
And so what we've done here is added the turnout gear extractor and the dryer into this. You'll see that there's enough money in the current capital to make that initial purchase, but we will need to make up for that expense. So we give it a life expectancy of about 15 years in the $30,000 investment. So that's why we kicked it up that amount of money.
Okay.
Those were all I found, is that,
Ambulance on 74.
there's no money in
there's no
there
money on
for
it,
that
yeah.
one, but,
If I may, on the ambulance for a
Yeah.
moment. You may remember town meeting day last year, the voters supported short-term borrowing for the ambulance replacement. It's on order. We learned recently the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank has a new opportunity to pool debt for these smaller, relatively smaller purchases compared to larger ones that are bonded for. I think, Shirley, the interest rate was 1%. So we checked with the town attorney and we asked about our vote last year with the short-term borrowing, if we could enter in a future pool like this for the financing, and he said, unfortunately, no. So I'll be bringing back to you thinking about, if we put this back on the warning to ask about bonding when we need to then pay for the ambulance when it's delivered, we could finance it at a 1% interest rate. They offered this pool for the first time right now. We anticipate they're going to offer it again, and that'll just give us the flexibility of, we'll see what the better option is with the interest rate when we go to finance it, if the board supports putting that on the warning in March. You don't have to decide right now,
Yeah.
but just, I'm just previewing it for you. It's
And so you understand that ambulance was ordered after the successful bond vote, yet the way the industry is right now, we can't get the ambulance chassis. So that we won't see the arrival of that ambulance. Surely I think it was at July is when we're expecting that potentially. So we have some time.
Okay.
So.
that ends the fire department's capital budget, so if there's no more questions for the chief, then we'll move on. Thank you very much. Good.
Thank you.
all. Have a safe holiday.
Yeah.
You too, thanks. So we'll move on to the outside services, and Eric and Shirley are probably going to work on this. Shirley, if you want to come to the front and center, and whoever's going to start this is, you're ready to go.
I can kick it off. So this part of your budget is looking at appropriations to outside services. We break them down for health, including the VNA, health officer stipends, the regional services, regional planning commission, park district, county taxes we need to pay, VLCT, among others, like Iroquois Association. Social services, we have our committee that allocates that funding to requests from nonprofit organizations and other groups. Our allocations, we need to change this from CCTA, but it's Green Mountain Transit's annual appropriation. You heard their update at your last meeting. And then our reserve funds, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Most of these, you'll see the proposals, we get these from the organizations. Not surprisingly, they've all gone up a little bit. I do report from the Social Services Organization. They met recently to make some funding awards for this current budget year, and they certainly are getting more requests and requests that are going up. I kept it level funded in this initial proposal, but I know Aaron Dickinson, new staff's at committee, passed on to me that they would certainly welcome more funding in their line item. And then also Lake Iroquois Association, they made the request to the board at $15,000. That covered their greeter program and the the dash, the assisted harvesting, and they didn't anticipate needing to do the harvesting, and as I was balancing the budget, I suggested $10,000 of their 15. Certainly it's the board's discretion how much you want to fund there, but I just deviated from the request slightly based on their presentation. And then finally, the land ERF funding and Affordable Housing Trust funding. And trying to bring in a lean budget, I did not fund either of those in my initial proposal here, looking at where we were in the bottom line and our reserve funds. So it's the board's discretion if you'd like to put additional funding in there, but where we were in the bottom line, and when I was looking at these, I wanted to deliver the bottom line where it landed, so I didn't put funding in here initially.
With the ERF and the Affordable Housing Trust, does this include where the level of those funds right now?
So I'll just mention, when you get the Planning Commission's comments, you're going to hear that they are requesting for funding to
For
go
both?
in both.
Okay.
Yep. I believe I don't have that number with me right now, the Affordable Housing Trust is maybe like 50,000, and the Environmental Reserve Fund is almost 419,000, and they have another 20,000, that is the stewardship fund, so for repairs, not for purchase, but
Right,
to
okay.
maintain.
And with the ERF, I assume there's not something looming that they have their eye on in terms of some purchasing land.
Not that I've heard from the Conservation Commission. We have a number of high priority parcels still that we're looking at, but there's nothing kind of impending at this
Yeah.
point. No, the Conservation Commission's meeting tomorrow morning, and you'll likely receive a letter from them asking
Okay, good, all right,
for
good,
funding in
good.
that
Yeah.
line, higher than it is right now, which is not funded originally.
Okay.
Eric, I don't have much to add to what you've already summarized, except for, like Eric said, the GMT ADA is 19.5. We heard from their presentation, that number in our list of increases that we'll present come January, that needs to go up to 23,000. And we just got the county tax budget today, that's 101, that needs to go up to 102.2. So you'll see, yeah, pretty close. So you'll see that we already have a couple of requests, because we know that we've got more accurate numbers now.
And I've got the Winooski Valley Park District will be coming in, hopefully have them in at your next meeting in January to give their annual update.
Any questions on services? All right. Next is revenue budget.
So we've spent multiple hours on the expense side, and this is the other side to make it balance. I've kind of alluded to this throughout the process and in my transmittal, so I'll just a few general points as you're thinking about balancing your budget here over the next month. Bill Himmons advising using 0.25% grand list increase for next year. That's about $5 million. Our grand list is over $2 billion. So what does that really mean? So $5 million on the grand list, the yield with the property tax rate would be about an extra $16,000 there. You take the growth of 5 million divided by the 100 and then multiply it by the tax rate, and that's essentially your yield from your increase in property value. It's the idea of these housing units, larger buildings, our larger commercial building like U-Haul, that was multiple millions of dollars just in that building. I think what we try to do too is think about what's coming ahead down the pipeline. So we'll have more housing coming online, maybe some more industrial in the next year. But the big piece here in the grand list will be, any day now we anticipate getting our CLA, and we know it's going to be below 85%. So the town will get a reappraisal order. We'll need to do that in the next few years. Bill Hinman believes there's going to be over 130 towns in the state getting the reappraisal order in the next year.
130?
Yeah, upwards to that many.
Only 251 towns, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're going to have probably half or more communities needing to do a reappraisal. When you get the order, it says you must do it, but it doesn't necessarily put a timeline on it. It becomes the capacity to actually do it. with limited number of people who can do this work. Bill's got some ideas. We have a consultant we used in the past who's sounds like he'll be able to do the work, and maybe hiring some people to do some field work for us, which is the heavy lift here to get out and inspect properties. But that'll be a couple years away, but certainly when that reappraisal's ended, the grand list is gonna go up by X amount, but, you know, in relation to taxes, you know, the rate might be able to go down, but your value's going up, your rate's going down. It's gonna be a wash to some extent, but that's a couple budgets in the future, but it'll be on the horizon in terms of the grand list growth. I've included in the draft budget, trying to balance a number of these factors, a rate increase of 3.25 cents. That's about $32 per 100,000 of assessed value. So we're looking at that median home assessment in town, and an assessment versus appraisal. This is what we assess it at in the median level. For our residential properties, it's about $98 more a year, about $8 per month. With local option tax, we budget increase about $180,000. We look at our rollback for 3 years, the rolling average. We've omitted the first half of 2020 for both the sales and the rooms and meals, just where we were at that point. And we looked back a quarter in the 2019. We've historically have been exceeding what we budget. We try to keep this conservative because you can have a bad year. And that goes into your fund balance policy of 10 to 20%. So we did round it up a little bit. I think we had another $40,000 or $50,000 just seeing on the performance there, but we feel comfortable where that's budgeted in this proposal. As you heard from the fire chief tonight, our town fees another source of revenue. Overall, this bucket's down a little bit, but the ambulance revenue is significantly up, the additional $100,000 projected here. We see other things down, like our recording fees, where the refi rates are not what they were a couple of years ago, so we're not getting as much town documents being recorded. For that was a big driver a couple of years ago. We're starting to see our investment income creep back up. I think we signed a CD the other day for 6 months at maybe 4%, which was quite a bit better than what we've seen the last couple of years. So our money will start working for us a little bit more that's in the bank, so that's always helpful in just managing cash flow and operations here. It went into a bit with fund balance use. What I'm proposing here structurally is that the town's used this for a number of years to help balance the budget, and a number of years we've exceeded the local option tax revenue, primarily coupled with expense savings. So even though we budget to use fund balance to help reduce taxes, we haven't actually had to use it. We're anticipating in FY23 we're likely going to need to use some of that, and it was quite a bit higher last year. It's been $500,000 for a number of years. I think it was over $650 in 23. Trying to incrementally step this down, so I think I have it in at about 518 or so to help offset taxes. I think as the town looks the next couple of years, trying to wean that down bit by bit each year, and maybe that's not really a placeholder for taxes at a certain point. Could think about other things like sweeping those into just capital savings for years, and then using that money to help fund the capital fund and not use operating dollars as much, where end of the fiscal year, if you have that surplus with local option tax, sweep it into the capital reserve fund and use that as a strategy as well. But I'm trying to, this is always challenging, trying to model a couple of years ahead, and you know, it's good, accounting for it to a lot of it's local option tax. We think we haven't done a detailed accounting, but trying to think too, what do you want to give back to taxpayers if it was from a taxing standpoint as well. So trying to balance those variables for you. Your policy is 10 to 20% of operating. How we've built this using fund balance for capital and operating, our projection is at the end of FY24, it would be about 17% in your range. That makes an assumption, looking at our local option tax receipts for the rest of this year, how the first quarter went, that's going to come in over budget by, I think, $300,000 is what we're modeling right now. But we have to make some assumptions and try to think conservatively as well. But those are kind of the moving pieces here for the board from a policy standpoint on that. And then we were trying to follow up on last week's discussion, the ARPA funds. We did include some in the proposal here. last year, it was $300,000 for general fund revenue to help balance things. We've decreased that down to 125 this year, but we've also included $92,000 towards what we're calling the one-time fee of the police retention incentive that's gonna hit its third year. So that was adopted by the board last spring, and we knew it was stepped up over multiple years, and this is the third year. So a thought is you could use ARPA revenue to offset that last year expense there. But it's an expense that will have to be, how it wants to be funded, you know, and this is one way to kind of carve it out with a one-time piece to think about. The ARPA funding, also we have allocations into the capital budget, which is a separate allocation. So the total ARPA number is just over 390 in these proposals. Shirley's got a tracking spreadsheet that we included to kind of give you a big picture look at what we've discussed the last few years in terms of capital and operating. Our original allocation was just over 3 million. If the board funded it along these in the proposed budget, it would likely be over a little over 1.9 million at the end of FY24. I think back to this time last year, and we were trying to figure out the ARPA rules that were tied to a lot of different things, and then I think in January, the Treasury Department changed the rules and said, you know, you could use it just towards operating, and the board, you know, given where we were last year, decided to use the $300,000 for that purpose. And we had built into that, like using it for parks replacements and town trail management funds, because those were the uses allowed last November and December towards some recreation projects, as we were trying to spread it around some other ways to not impact those other areas of the operating budget. So certainly a lot of moving pieces there. I know the board has a lot to think about with ARPA, and trying to produce a lean budget. And you know, frankly, the tax rate is higher than I want it to be in your proposal, but there's been a challenging year, I'll say, just on that front, and your direction where you want to land on your bottom line expense side, and then how you want to balance that with the revenue side. And probably your main levers to pull are the taxing, the fund balance, and the ARPA primarily. However where you land on your expense side of the budget.
Okay, that makes sense. Just one question, because this is a number I'd like to have. If I look at the tax rate from fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2024, I'm asking if my math's correct, that's a 10.6% increase in the anticipated tax rate?
Believe so, right around there.
Okay. I'm hesitant, I guess a comment is I'm more like, if we decide that we want more revenue to offset the tax, let's say, rate increase, I think I'm more likely to look at the fund balance than I am ARPA. ARPA's, in a sense, it's easy to use because it's kind of like, I hate this term, but people think of it as free money. But what I worry about is if we use it for tax abatement, we don't have it available for projects that folks want to happen in our town.
On ARPA, you have a timeline too, where you could step it down. I think next FY25 budget would be your last opportunity to use it, because you have to spend it by the end of calendar year 26.
That actually is a very important point, and I hadn't taken that into consideration, is it does come with that timeline we have to spend the money by it's going to be upon us a lot quicker than we think it will be.
And the timeline to allocate comes first.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
That actually, I'm going to actually retract what I just said. Maybe not change it, but let me give it some thought, because that's so important.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly.
Then you're, to be aware of too, you have that replacement piece where, you know, going into this budget, I had hoped, okay, that, you know, we used 300 in ARPA, 300,000 in this budget. By reduced expenses and increased revenues, that will need to wash out somewhere in the budget. But given the inflation, we weren't able to wash that out completely. So If it carries for a couple years, depending how the other balancing mechanism and the budget go, that's gonna have to be made up somewhere in revenue at some point. Just for the board to be aware of in the couple of flowing years ahead here.
Shirley, as you look at that need to allocate date, are you concerned that we aren't making, that could become a problem down the road?
I think we need to have that public meeting
Yes.
soon in 2023.
Good, all right.
To
that's
start
good
that
answer.
allocation, because there certainly, I think a lot of uses, and I think there'll be a lot of public community, from the Energy Committee especially, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
There'll
good.
be a lot of requests on the funds and giving you time to prioritize.
So the alarm bells aren't going off quite yet.
Pretty soon. Only because that process will take time.
Yep. Okay,
And
good.
that'll be my focus in the new year to tackle that project.
Good.
We talked about it a month or two ago, but that'll be probably one of my main focuses here once we wrap up the budget process.
Well, just looking at, the ambulance and the delays on that, if there's big kind of more capital type purchases that need to be made and the money has to be spent, in X amount of time, I mean, it could be, a year or more out before we get a deliverable if that's something we decided to put it towards, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Same with, if you decide to do any public works projects,
Right.
procuring the contractors and, we had designed we have some things designed already, but yeah, that procurement and
Yeah.
schedule.
There won't be any shortage of places to spend it. That's,
Yeah.
What I anticipate is there's going to be a lot of support for, let's say, using it for some sort of a community center.
Of course.
But the thing is we may not be able to use it for a community center if that project doesn't move ahead, fast enough, if you will. Right?
Yeah, I've thought about that a little bit, where the trajectory there is probably getting a report to you and the library trustees maybe sometime in the late spring, early summer. If hypothetically, if there was a town need to acquire a piece of property, maybe the ARPA funding is something to use towards a land acquisition within the next couple of years. But it's kind of a few steps down the road here, but that's one of the potential things you could think about.
Right. And if you think of a little, under 2 million, that sounds like a lot, but with all the projects on the list, it's probably won't go very far.
Yeah.
And if you think of something like the library community center, even if you said we're going to use the whole thing, which we can't because we won't be in construction by then, it wouldn't really even make a dent in that project. So how can you most effectively use those funds for, like, one time, if we were going to purchase the land for the community center, capital projects? I'll just going to say, for instance, don't shoot the messenger, but you're going to hear again from the planning commission about the second sidewalk plow and the limited number of sidewalk miles we have and what we plow and making that a livable, walkable Williston. So there's a good use of ARPA one time. And the fact that, and as you heard Bruce say as well, if that plow goes down, we have no backup.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll hear that. So I think, from my perspective, using it on things that we can get done and get done quickly and meet our deadlines is,
Yeah.
of course, that one comes with other issues and employees and things.
Yeah, you need
But,
an ongoing personnel cost with it
Yeah.
as well. So.
Wow.
So are we through with revenue for tonight? We'll be talking about this again next year.
That's the end of the proposal.
Moving to the Communications Union District Representative, Eric, you have a proposal for us?
So the Communications Union District that was formed amongst Williston, Essex Junction, South Burlington, and Shelburne in November, ready to form a new government formally, I guess. So looking to have an organizational meeting in early January. I've attended a few calls throughout as I've been doing this study with a consultant looking at this that the state's been funding. We're looking to have a meeting in early January. So as the board to consider appointing me to just start this, to have the town have a seat at the table. I've had one community member reach out to me expressing interest already, and this person has a good background for the position as well. Our plan was to post this and see whatever applications that the town receives and the board to interview folks, and I'd happily step aside or move to an alternate role or step aside altogether, depending on what applicants you get at that point. But this is more administratively looking to have a representative at the first meeting, first couple of meetings, if that's what it takes. So there's somebody else that will serve the role.
Questions for Eric regarding this? Looking for a motion then.
Move to appoint Town Manager Eric Wells as Williston's representative of the Chittenden County Communications Union District.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And there are no opponents. So moving on to manager's report.
So a couple of brief things. You have at your seats this evening the Q1 quarterly report. Delayed a little bit for this fiscal year. The reason is we decided to take a look at this report, and Aaron Dickinson led this effort to work with departments on looking at the data, looking at the presentation. You'll see there's more graphics and visuals and charts here. Really want to work with each department about how they want to share their story to the board and the community. So still consider it a work in progress. Welcome your feedback on any time on how this information is presented, what you're seeing. We'll be starting now we have this kind of modified template. We'll spell at the end of the second quarter, so we'll get that to you in a much more timely manner. Just took a little bit to work through this, but so you have that to look through this evening. I'll share the PDF version as well that we put together. And Erin she did a great job, took the lead on that. And then the tax sale property update, the mobile home the town took possession of at 5394 Williston Road. I think we've had to assess it, look for things like asbestos and other materials before removing it. We've had a couple consultants in there doing that work. We found someone who was going to remove it, hopefully in the new year. It sounds like they had an opening in their schedule, which is the good news. We've spent about $3,000 before removing it just to assess it and look at it. There was a couple of things we need to abate. I don't know the final cost will be to remove it, but I think when we're all in here, we'll be spending over $10,000 to address the property. The good news is the Chittenden Solid Waste District has community cleanup funds that are available to towns. We have our maximum allotment of $5,000 that we haven't spent for a bit. I requested to use those funds for this project to help offset the cost, and they've agreed to award them to us. So we just need to we'll get reimbursed for those expenses. Unless the board wants to move in a different direction with those funds, it's a way with the project we have right now, and those funds get recouped over time every year, so they'll accumulate again, and we can use them again on something.
Good.
That's all I had.
Anything else?
Last meeting of the year.
Yeah, well, thank you for your comments. I think it's mutual.
Any other business to bring forward tonight? If not, this is the last meeting of the calendar year, and we'll see you all next year. To the people out there in the Zoom land, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and same to the staff and the board. So I will declare us adjourned.